They once convinced you that the world was destined to collapse in 2012. December 21st, winter solstice, the day the ancient Maya calendar supposedly expired. You probably remember the chaos surrounding it, the dramatic documentaries, the doomsday countdowns, the survival bunkers, the websites flashing seconds ticking toward annihilation. For a moment, an entire global industry of fear formed around a date carved in stone by a civilization most people never studied, a civilization many couldn't even locate on a map. And then the day arrived. Nothing happened. No fiery sky. No collapsing earth. The next morning, dawn broke like it always had. People brewed their morning coffee, drove to their jobs, checked their messages. The apocalypse merchants quietly packed their things, moved on to new predictions, and the world learned what seemed like a simple lesson. The Maya were wrong. Except they weren't. You are about to enter a world rarely discussed, a world of old knowledge, ancient calculations, and prophecies misunderstood for an entire generation. Tonight, the misinformation surrounding 2012 is going to be stripped away. Because what no one ever told you is that the Maya never predicted the end of the world. Not once, not in any ancient text, not in any inscription. What they marked on their calendar wasn't an ending, it was a turning, the reset of a cosmic cycle, the beginning of a transitional era that, according to their own calculations, would last decades. And if their timing was correct, we are living right in the heart of that transition at this exact moment. The Maya did not foresee an instant apocalypse. They foresaw transformation, slow, turbulent transformation, unfolding across roughly 20 years. A period marked by disorder, disruption, and eventual renewal. And what's even more unsettling is that the Maya weren't the only ones who spoke of such a transition. 500 miles to the northwest, in the region that is now Mexico City, another civilization carved its own predictions into stone, the Aztecs, and they too believed our era would end not with fire or water but with movement, with the earth trembling beneath humanity, with instability spreading through every structure people thought was permanent. Tonight, we step away from the Hollywood versions of these prophecies and examine what was actually written. We're going back to the original sources, hieroglyphs, codices, carvings, and oral traditions maintained by descendants of those same civilizations. What emerges when we do that is a picture far more complex, far more intricate, and far more familiar than the sensationalized myths of 2012. To understand what the Maya truly predicted, you must first understand the people behind the prophecy and what dominated their worldview: time. The Maya didn't merely record time, they revered it, feared it, and devoted their entire intellectual tradition to mastering it. While medieval societies in Europe were still debating the shape of the planet, Maya astronomers had measured the solar year with near-perfect accuracy, within seconds of modern instruments. They tracked the cycles of Venus with precision so sharp it still astonishes researchers. They predicted eclipses centuries before they happened. And they did all this without telescopes, without advanced machinery, armed only with generations of observation, mathematics, and an almost supernatural patience. This wasn't the work of a superstitious culture stumbling through myths. It was science, rigorous, mathematical, and deeply systematic. A science built upon one central belief: time is not linear. To the Maya, time wasn't a straight path stretching endlessly forward. It was a circle, a spiral, a sequence of cycles repeating, not perfectly but rhythmically. The same energies and patterns returned again and again, like seasons, like tides, like breath. Understand these cycles, they believed, and you could peer into the future, not through magic but through pattern recognition recorded over thousands of years. To do this, the Maya created multiple calendars, 17 major ones that we know of, each tracking a different cycle. One measured sacred ritual days. Another tracked agriculture. Others followed the movements of planets or long historical epochs. The most famous of these was the long count calendar, the one responsible for the 2012 misunderstanding. Unlike the ritual or agricultural calendars, the long count was designed to mark history itself. It functioned like a cosmic counter, measuring days from a mythic starting point, August 11, 3114 BCE, the date the Maya believed this world age began. The long count used units of time unfamiliar to modern life. 1 kin for a day, 1 unal for 20 days, 1 ton for a 360-day cycle, 1 katun for 20 tons, and 1 baktan for 20 katuns, about 4 centuries. The Maya believed 13 baktons formed a complete great cycle, around 5,125 years. And when you calculate 5,125 years from the starting date the Maya inscribed, you land on December 21, 2012. That moment marked the completion of the 13th baktan, a reset, an odometer rolling over into a new count. Not an explosion, not a collapse, not the destruction of the world, just the start of a new epoch. So how did the world come to believe the Maya predicted doomsday? The answer lies in modern authors from the 1970s and 80s who layered their own beliefs, New Age ideas, extraterrestrial theories, astrological interpretations, onto the long count. Their books spread widely, and Hollywood seized the sensation, amplifying it through movies, TV specials, countdowns, and documentaries. Meanwhile, the voices of real Maya people were drowned beneath a tidal wave of speculation created by outsiders. Yet if you ask the Maya still living today, more than 6 million across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, they will tell you this: the end of a cycle is not a catastrophe. It is a transition. Just like the moment between one year ending and another beginning, it is a threshold. It is a shift of energy. Some things dissolve, new things emerge, but the change is gradual. According to modern Maya day keepers, the keepers of the ancient calendars, this transition lasts roughly 20 years, from 2012 to 2032. Meaning we are not past the prophecy, we are living inside it. And that brings us to the prophecies themselves, the real ones, not the Hollywood versions. The most important collection of Maya prophetic writings is known as the Books of the Jaguar Priest, the Chilam Balam. These texts, recorded in the centuries following the Spanish conquest, preserve centuries-old prophetic traditions passed down orally long before they were written. They describe cycles of 20 years, each carrying its own tone, energy, and set of events. The cycle we are currently inside was written down long before our era arrived, and its descriptions feel disturbingly familiar. According to the ancient jaguar priests, this era would see the coming of the Quetzal, the sacred emerald-feathered bird symbolizing great spiritual change. It would see sicknesses that bring blood, suffering, widespread illness. It would see the return of a deity known as Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, symbol of knowledge, transformation, and upheaval. And then the prophecy speaks of sorrow stretching across years, the sun darkened, skies divided, agricultural shortage, political paralysis, leaders fragmented, unable to act. As strange as those words appear on an old page, they echo eerily through the world we now inhabit. The writings do not merely describe dramatic celestial events. They speak of the atmosphere itself behaving strangely, of seasons losing their familiar rhythm, of skies that no longer follow the patterns generations relied upon. When the jaguar priests wrote of the sky dividing, it was poetic language for a world whose environmental balance had fractured. To them, the sky was not just air, it was order, stability, the cosmic canopy that signaled whether the world was aligned or out of harmony. And when that harmony fractured, the earth below followed. They warned that crops would fail, that staple foods like corn and squash would become scarce. Famine, they said, would not strike from a single drought but from a broader breakdown of the natural cycles on which life depended. And the signs of this collapse would ripple into human society. Systems of leadership would weaken. Those in positions of authority would become scattered, unable to govern, unable to unite, unable to make decisions. A paralysis of power. A silence at the highest levels where decisive leadership should have been. Now, consider the world around you today: global crops destabilized by shifting climate patterns, governments locked in conflict or confusion, technological systems advancing faster than societies can adapt, millions questioning the trustworthiness of institutions, and the familiar cycles of weather behaving unpredictably. Whether one believes in prophecy or not, the parallels are difficult to ignore. The Maya left not only written prophecy but visual prophecy as well. Before the Spanish conquest, Maya scribes created books known as codices, folding bark papers filled with astronomy, rituals, myth, and prediction. Only 4 survived the destruction by European priests who burned thousands of similar manuscripts, convinced they were erasing demonic influence. One of those surviving codices, the Dresden Codex, is perhaps the most extraordinary astronomical document from the ancient world. And hidden inside its pages lies an image that scholars have debated for generations. On one particular page, a celestial serpent stretches across the heavens. From its mouth pours an immense volume of water, more than rain, more than storm. It descends like a flood released from the sky itself. Below, a goddess tilts a jar, and from her vessel, more water flows endlessly, drowning the world beneath. Structures crumble beneath the rising waters, humanity overwhelmed by a deluge unleashed not from the sea but from the sky. Many interpret this scene as mythological, a depiction of a flood that ended a previous world age. But that explanation does not fit neatly. The Dresden Codex is not a mythological book. It is a predictive book. Nearly every page deals with cycles and future events. Why then would a single page break that pattern? Why would they hide a mythological flood among pages dedicated to calculations of eclipses, lunar cycles, planetary movements, and warnings? Some researchers have suggested the image is a forecast, a symbolic depiction of a time when water from the sky, possibly in the form of storms, atmospheric events, or even something more dramatic, would overwhelm the world. And this imagery, surprisingly, is not isolated. Across continents, across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, similar visions emerge. Floods rising, storms intensifying, coastlines rewritten by forces above and below. Whether coincidence, collective memory, or something deeper, the resonance is striking. But the Maya worldview contained more than cycles of time and imagery of destruction. Their cosmology described 9 powerful forces, 9 divine beings associated with the underworld, known as the Lords of the Night. These weren't demons or villains. They were forces of transformation, agents of endings and beginnings, guardians of thresholds between ages. They governed the uncomfortable spaces where one era collapses and another begins. They represented the darkness before dawn, the dissolution required for rebirth. At a site known as Tortuguero, a damaged stone carving references the completion of the 13th Bakhtin, the same Bakhtin that ended in 2012. The inscription, though partially broken, includes a phrase scholars translated as the descent of Balan Yacht, the collective name for the 9 lords. Not an apocalypse. A descent. A returning. A re-emergence of transformational forces into the world. The stone breaks before explaining what happens next. Some see that break as symbolic, an intentional gap, representing the uncertainty of transition. Others see it as unfortunate coincidence. But whatever its origin, the carving implies that 2012 didn't mark an end, but a moment when the boundaries between worlds thinned, allowing the forces of upheaval, revelation, and restructuring to influence the world above. If you consider the era we are living in, the idea of what was hidden becoming visible feels strangely appropriate. Secrets exposed, old systems collapsing, truths once buried emerging into public awareness. Entire industries, institutions, and global structures have been shaken in ways that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. Perhaps this is coincidence. Perhaps it is pattern. Or perhaps the Maya understood something about cycles of history that modern society has forgotten. The Maya weren't the only civilization that mapped the rise and fall of ages. Northwest of their lands, another people carved their cosmology into stone, encoded their warnings in myth, and predicted the fate of the age we now inhabit. They were known as the Mexica, though most of the world today calls them the Aztecs. And like the Maya, they inherited knowledge from civilizations older than themselves. Cultures reaching back into antiquity, carrying with them stories of creation, destruction, and rebirth. To the Aztecs, the world you and I live in is not the first world. It is the 5th. 4 worlds came before ours, 4 suns, each ending in catastrophic transformation. They believed that each age had its own humanity, its own divine influences, and its own downfall. And each ending carried a distinct signature. Jaguars devouring giants, storms tearing civilizations apart, fire from the sky turning life to ash, and great floods drowning entire continents. And this, right now, our world, the 5th sun, was believed to end through movement, through instability so pervasive that the earth itself would become unreliable. In their language, the term for our age carried a double meaning: movement of the earth and movement within society. To them, quakes and upheavals were not merely geological. They were symbolic of something larger, something that shook the foundations not just of land but of civilization. As we step deeper into their prophecy, a picture emerges: 2 great civilizations, separated by centuries yet united by a shared understanding of cycles, transitions, and upheavals. And that picture resembles the era we now find ourselves in far more than anyone expected. The Aztec understanding of past worlds was not simply myth for them, it was a way of explaining why the universe behaves the way it does. They believed the cosmos itself was unstable, constantly moving toward balance only to fall back into chaos when its cycles matured. To them, the forces that shaped the heavens and the forces that shaped society were inseparable. When the world trembled, so did kingdoms. When cycles shifted, so did the fate of entire populations. Their stories of former ages were not morality tales. They were warnings. In the age they called the first sun, the world was inhabited by beings much larger than humans. Giants who lived under the rule of a powerful deity connected with darkness, mirrors, and transformation. Though these figures may sound mythical, the Aztecs treated them as part of cosmic history, something that existed in another cycle of time. That world met its end in a violent clash between 2 great gods, one associated with night and shadow, the other with knowledge and renewal. When their rivalry reached its breaking point, jaguars were unleashed upon the giants, ending the age entirely. The sun of that era went dark, marking the first collapse of creation. What came next was a world governed by wind, a time the Aztecs imagined as gentler, a period of harmony and cultivation. But even peaceful ages faced destruction. When the god of wind fell victim to the revenge of his cosmic rival, hurricanes tore through that world with unimaginable ferocity, ripping apart everything its people built. The survivors of that age, according to the myth, turned into monkeys, clinging to trees as the storm devoured their civilization. The third world was a realm shaped by rain and water, overseen by a deity connected to storms and fertility. It was a time of abundance, where crops thrived and life flourished. But the end came not by water, ironically, but by fire falling from the sky. Some versions describe volcanic eruptions unleashing destruction. Others speak of something burning descending from the heavens. Whatever its form, the flames consumed the world and forced the survivors to transform into birds to escape their fate. The fourth sun returned the cycle to water, this time not gentle rain but relentless deluge. The rains came without mercy, flooding everything until no land remained. The people of this age were said to have become fish, living within the submerged world. Yet even in this tale of destruction, the Aztecs preserved a story of survival. A man and woman who found refuge inside a hollow tree, floating above the drowned earth until the waters finally withdrew, allowing a new world to take shape. And then, after these 4 cycles of creation and catastrophe, came the world we inhabit, the fifth sun. A world not born gently but through sacrifice. When the previous age ended and darkness covered the world, the gods gathered at the sacred city of Teotihuacan to determine how a new sun could be created. Fire was prepared. A great sacrifice was required. 2 gods volunteered, one proud and radiant, the other humble and sickly. Each approached the flames, but only the humble one stepped in without hesitation. His leap birthed the sun that lights our skies today. The proud god, shamed, threw himself in afterward, becoming the moon. But the new sun did not move across the sky. It stood still, demanding more. The gods understood the terrible truth. For the world to continue, sacrifice must continue. Their own blood was offered to set the sun in motion. And so the Aztecs believed the survival of their world depended on continuous offerings. Without them the sun would stop. Darkness would return. The age would collapse. For the Aztecs, sacrifice wasn't merely ritual violence. It was cosmic maintenance. It was their way of ensuring the world did not fall back into the void. But even with constant offerings, they believed no sun lasted forever. Our world was destined to fall like the ones before it. And according to the knowledge passed down through their priests, its end would come through movement, shifting earth, instability, trembling foundations. A time when the land itself rejected balance, when everything people trusted, foundations, structures, institutions, would become uncertain. Movement meant more than earthquakes. It meant change so deep and so total that even those structures that seemed unshakable would fracture. Scholars who study Aztec texts often debate whether their prophecies were intended literally, symbolically, or both. But the power of their vision lies not in literal accuracy but in the uncanny way it describes our own era. A time defined by instability, by dramatic shifts in society, by systems shaking at their foundations. Their idea of movement was not restricted to the earth. It applied to human structures, belief systems, political orders, and even cultural identity. When all of these tremble at once, the Aztecs believe the era is approaching its culmination. But perhaps the most widely known prophecy linked to the Aztecs is the tale of the feathered serpent's return, a god whose influence stretched across Mesoamerica for centuries. A being known as Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs and Kukulkan to the Maya. Stories of this figure's return were so powerful that they affected the course of history itself. The serpent of feathers symbolized the merging of earth and sky, body and spirit, knowledge and nature. He was seen as a guide, a bringer of wisdom, a civilizer who taught writing, astronomy, agriculture, and moral discipline. Unlike other gods, he was said to reject human sacrifice, instead promising to rule through balance and enlightenment. Legends say he once ruled an ancient kingdom, bringing peace and prosperity, until he was deceived by the trickster god associated with conflict and illusion. Overcome by shame, he abandoned his city and journeyed east, promising to return one day from across the sea. This promise echoed through centuries and carried such weight that when foreign ships appeared on the horizon in 1519, the Mexica rulers hesitated, uncertain whether these strangers, armed with steel, riding animals never seen before, were simply men or the return of the long-awaited deity. History would twist that hesitation into tragedy. The empire fell. The population was ravaged by disease and war. Entire civilizations were rewritten. And for generations, the tale persisted that the Spaniards were mistaken for gods. Yet many indigenous traditions claim otherwise. They argue that the figure who arrived from the east was not the prophesied one but a deceiver, a distortion of the prophecy, not its fulfillment. The real return, they say, has not yet happened. Whether literal or symbolic, the prophecy of return reflected something deeper, the expectation of transformation, a shift in consciousness, a cycle of knowledge reawakening, something that challenges old systems and old ways of thinking. The Aztecs, like the Maya, captured their worldview in stone. One of their greatest achievements remains a massive carved disc, known to the world as the Sunstone. Though commonly misidentified as a calendar, it is more accurately a cosmic map, capturing the cycles of creation and destruction, the passage of time, the role of divine forces, and the fate of the current world. At its center sits the sun god, his tongue shaped like a blade, reminding all who look at it that this age was born of sacrifice and will one day require sacrifice again. Surrounding him are symbols of the four destroyed worlds, each marking a catastrophe from another age. This arrangement suggests that catastrophe is not random in their worldview. It is cyclical, predictable, part of the cosmic rhythm. The stone does not merely record history. It warns of repetition. It implies that our world, like the ones before it, rests precariously on the edge of transformation. This is a natural pause point. The deeper you look into the ancient civilizations of Mesoamerica, the more a strange pattern begins to emerge, one that suggests their prophecies were not isolated fragments of imagination, but interconnected reflections of a worldview shared across centuries. The Maya and the Mexica did not exist in sealed cultural boxes. Their territories overlapped through trade networks, traveling merchants, shared myths, exchanged rituals, and migrating lineages. Though separated in time by hundreds of years, their ideas flowed like rivers between temples and marketplaces, altering in form but not in essence. This explains why the feathered serpent god appears with different names in different regions yet carries the same symbolism. It explains why both civilizations understood time as a cycle rather than a straight line. It explains the similarity in their stories of past destructions, their beliefs in cosmic eras, and their warnings about the period we are living in now. Neither culture saw themselves as inventors of prophecy. They saw themselves as interpreters of cosmic patterns far older than humanity itself. And perhaps the most startling realization is this: the shift they believed we would face was not intended to destroy humanity. It was meant to transform it. They envisioned a threshold, a time when the old systems would no longer function, when hidden truths would rise, and when the world would be forced to confront its imbalances. In their eyes, transitions were not punishments, they were corrections. To both cultures, the universe behaved like a living organism. When disharmony grew too great, the organism shifted. And those shifts were never quiet. As we move deeper into this understanding, it becomes clear that the visions left behind in stone and bark paper were not simply about physical events like earthquakes, storms, or celestial disturbances. They were about societal fractures, psychological upheavals, moral realignments, and transformations in how humans relate to the world around them. What they called movement could just as easily apply to political instability as to shifting tectonic plates. What they meant by floods could just as easily mean overwhelming waves of change as literal water rising. To understand this, it helps to look at the prophecies of other cultures. Prophecies that emerged with no contact, no shared geography, no exchanged traditions. And yet, astonishingly, they describe the same patterns. In medieval France, a man named Nostradamus wrote cryptic verses about floods, upheavals, a great star burning through the sky, kingdoms collapsing, and leaders fleeing from their people. In Bulgaria, a blind woman named Baba Vanga spoke of coastlines changing, disasters increasing, and powerful nations losing influence. In America, a trance-reading mystic named Edgar Cayce predicted dramatic shifts in climate and geography during a period he believed would arrive in the early 21st century. In England, prophecies attributed to a woman called Mother Shipton described an age where the climate would become unpredictable, hot in one place, cold in another, dry one season, drown the next. And in Ireland, a medieval list of papal predictions known as the Prophecy of the Popes seemed to suggest that humanity would face judgment at the end of a long spiritual cycle. None of these figures lived during the Maya or Aztec empires. None spoke their languages. None studied their calendars or shared their cosmology. They had no contact with Mesoamerican ideas. Yet the parallels are extraordinary. All these prophecies point to the same era, our era. All describe instability, upheaval, environmental extremes, political collapse, and spiritual crisis. All frame the present age not as an ending but as a passage. This convergence becomes even more striking when you consider timing. The Maya transition period from 2012 to 2032 overlays almost perfectly with the timeframes referenced by Nostradamus, Baba Vanga, and Edgar Cayce. It corresponds to global shifts we are currently witnessing. Changes in climate patterns, disruptions in food systems, struggles between political powers, the rise of new technologies altering society faster than laws or ethics can adapt. It is as if multiple civilizations across different ages and continents were observing the same cycle, an invisible tide in human history that rises at specific intervals, and they were all pointing to now as the moment of turning. Yet what truly sets these prophecies apart is not their predictions of chaos, but their insistence that chaos is not the final stage. The Maya, the Aztecs, the mystics of Europe, and the seers of distant lands all saw the same thing: a period of turbulence followed by renewal, a restoration of balance, a reawakening of something that humanity has forgotten. This idea is echoed in the structure of their myths. Each age ends in destruction, yes, but each destruction makes way for something new, something more refined or more aware. To them, destruction was not random tragedy. It was a necessary clearing, a cosmic reset meant to dissolve the old so the new could take shape. Think of a forest where old growth must burn for seeds to germinate. Think of a snake shedding its skin. Think of an eclipse where the sun disappears only to return brighter minutes later. These metaphors existed across ancient cultures because they understood cycles not as doom but as transformation. And in this transformative lens, the events of our era, technological acceleration, destabilized weather, polarized politics, mass migrations, and sudden cultural shifts, look less like random chaos and more like symptoms of a world in transition. A world stepping from one cycle to another. Yet ancient prophecies were never meant to frighten. They were warnings in the truest sense, messages meant to guide, not terrorize. They suggested that outcomes depend on choices, that cycles can be navigated skillfully or blindly, that awareness can soften the impact of change. The Maya believed rituals, intention, and consciousness could stabilize transitions. The Aztecs believed sacrifice, symbolic or literal, could prolong balance. European mystics believed spiritual reform would determine humanity's path through crisis. All of them saw prophecy not as fixed destiny but as a map. And maps, no matter how ancient, are only useful if someone reads them. For ancient civilizations, prophecy was never meant to be entertainment. It was never meant to be consumed passively, debated endlessly, or reduced to spectacle. Prophecy was a responsibility. It was knowledge handed down with the expectation that those who received it would act differently because of it. To the Maya and the Aztecs, seeing a cycle approaching its turning point was not an excuse for fear, it was a call to awareness. They believed that the most dangerous moments in history were not marked by sudden destruction, but by gradual forgetting. Forgetting who we are. Forgetting our relationship with the earth. Forgetting the limits of growth. Forgetting that every system, no matter how advanced, eventually reaches a point where it can no longer sustain itself in its current form. This is why their prophecies speak less about a single catastrophic day and more about a long period of imbalance. A time when the world does not collapse all at once but begins to feel unfamiliar. When the rules that once governed reality stop working as expected. When effort produces diminishing returns. When progress accelerates but fulfillment disappears. In such periods, ancient cultures believed the danger was not the change itself, but resistance to it. The Maya understood that transitions expose weaknesses. They believed that when cycles shift, everything built on unstable foundations begins to crack. Structures that depend on endless extraction, endless expansion, or endless consumption become brittle. Societies that reward disconnection over cooperation lose cohesion. Leadership systems that prioritize control over wisdom lose legitimacy. None of this happens overnight. It unfolds slowly, almost invisibly, until the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. From this perspective, famine was not merely the absence of food. It was the breakdown of harmony between people and land. Political paralysis was not simply failed leadership. It was the consequence of systems no longer aligned with reality. Disease was not just biological. It was symbolic of imbalance spreading through every layer of life. The Maya did not believe humanity was being punished. They believed humanity was being corrected. The Aztecs shared this belief, though they expressed it differently. To them, sacrifice was not about appeasing cruel gods. It was about acknowledging that nothing moves forward without cost. That creation demands surrender. That renewal requires letting go of what no longer serves the balance of the whole. In the modern world, sacrifice has taken on a very different meaning. We no longer place offerings on stone altars, but we sacrifice constantly, often without realizing it. We sacrifice mental health for productivity. We sacrifice ecosystems for convenience. We sacrifice truth for comfort. We sacrifice long-term stability for short-term gain. What ancient prophecy suggests is not that humanity must suffer, but that humanity must choose what it is willing to release. This is where the idea of movement becomes crucial. Movement is not only earthquakes or shifting landmasses. It is the movement of ideas, the movement of power, the movement of identity, the movement of consciousness itself. When systems stop serving life, they move, or they break. We are living in an age where information moves faster than wisdom, where technology evolves faster than ethics, where global systems are deeply interconnected yet profoundly fragile. A disruption in one area ripples across the entire world. Supply chains fracture. Economies tremble. Social trust erodes. What once felt solid now feels provisional. To ancient eyes, this would not look like chaos. It would look like transition. The Maya spoke of a time when the boundary between worlds would thin. Not literal worlds but conceptual ones, the visible and the hidden, the known and the denied. In such periods, truths that were long buried surface rapidly. Secrets lose their protection. Power structures are exposed. Narratives collapse. This can feel overwhelming, even frightening. But from the perspective of cyclical time, it is necessary. You cannot enter a new cycle carrying the unresolved weight of the old one. Every previous world in Aztec mythology ended because it could not adapt. Each sun burned itself out through imbalance. And yet, after every ending, something new emerged, different, altered, shaped by the lessons of what came before. The question embedded in all these prophecies is not whether the world will change. It is whether humanity will change with it. Ancient cultures believed awareness was the deciding factor. Consciousness was not an abstract concept to them, it was a force. A stabilizing influence during periods of upheaval. Those who remained aware of the cycles could navigate them with less destruction. Those who clung blindly to the old ways were swept aside. This is why prophecy was paired with ritual, reflection, and responsibility. Knowing the future without preparing for it was considered dangerous. In the modern world, we have inherited the warnings but abandoned the preparation. We analyze, debate, sensationalize, but rarely integrate. Yet the core message remains remarkably consistent across cultures and centuries. The transition is not automatic. The outcome is not guaranteed. Renewal is possible, but it is not effortless. The ancient seers did not promise salvation. They promised opportunity. An opportunity to realign with the rhythms of the planet. An opportunity to rebuild systems that value sustainability over dominance. An opportunity to redefine success, progress, and prosperity. But opportunity only exists for those who recognize it. The Maya believed the new cycle would be shaped by human behavior. The Aztecs believed the sun would continue only as long as balance was maintained. European mystics warned that spiritual decay would precede societal collapse. All of them placed responsibility squarely in human hands. The future, they believed, was participatory. We stand now in the middle of the window they described. Not at the beginning. Not at the end. In the unstable center where choices matter most. Where small decisions compound into massive outcomes. Where direction is still fluid. And perhaps that is why this era feels so intense. Why everything seems accelerated. Why the pressure feels constant. Why the old certainties no longer provide comfort. This is not the calm before the storm. This is the storm of transformation itself. What emerges on the other side will not be decided by prophecy alone. It will be decided by awareness, adaptability, and the willingness to let go of what no longer belongs in the next cycle. The ancient calendars did not end. They turned. And like every turning in history, this one asks the same question it always has. Will humanity move with the cycle, or be broken by it? We are not witnessing the end of the world but the end of a way of living within it. Ancient civilizations did not leave us predictions to inspire fear, but to invite awareness. Cycles turn whether we are ready or not, yet how we pass through them remains a choice. The future is not waiting to happen to us, it is responding to what we become as this cycle unfolds.